This night, we step into a time when fun came with a higher body count than your average battlefield. No safety nets, no referees, and if you lost, well, at least the crowd went home entertained. They didn't need fireworks or fairgrounds, just a few sharp objects, some heavy ale, and a willingness to see what broke first, the equipment or the participants. So wherever you are, in bed, on the couch, or swaying in a hammock, get comfortable, and let yourself fall into the atmosphere. They call it sport. A pleasant way for knights to prove their valor, they say. But standing here, pressed against the wooden rail, you start to think it looks more like a sale of dented cookware, if cookware could grunt and bleed. You're at the edge of the tournament field, the lists. A neat name for a place where dozens of armored men run at each other in one great clattering knot. This is the melee, not the polite two-man duel with flowers and applause, but the mass battle, teams marked only by scraps of color tied to their arms. Some of those scraps are already torn loose, trampled into the churned mud. The air smells of crushed grass, horse sweat, and the sour leather of helmets that haven't dried since yesterday. Marshals in padded coats pace the rails, staves in hand, looking for trouble. Trouble, in this place, is simply everything happening inside. A trumpet note wavers, and the lines begin to move. First, a slow walk, shields up, weapons resting across mail-clad shoulders. You hear the scrape of metal on metal, the muted thud of boots sinking in soft ground. Then, as if someone kicked the earth, the whole field collapses inward. The sound is not a clean clash. It's a muffled, sickening impact, like barrels of nails dropped from a cart. These are blunted swords, rounded maces, spears with heads thick as fists, meant to be safe. Safe enough that a lord can send his second son in without too much worry. But safe, here means you'll keep most of your teeth if you're lucky. The man to your left laughs when a knight's helmet spins off and rolls into the rail. His laugh stops when another rider falls, pinned under two horses, the marshals shoving hard to get them clear. The crowd is a tide of noise, cheers, groans, shouts of wagers being changed mid-fight. A merchant behind you swears his silver is on the red-armored side. A butcher further back yells that the blues fight dirtier and will win for it. A boy threads through the legs of strangers with a tray of watered ale, not caring who wins so long as someone pays. Inside the crush, men try to fight with grace, but grace dies in mud. A knight swings and misses, his blade catching on a comrade's shield. Another goes down on one knee, shield over his head as hooves spray clods of earth over him. Somewhere in the noise, a groan rises, deep, human, too pained to be ignored, and then is swallowed by the next charge. The melee doesn't stop because someone is hurt. It stops when the marshal calls it, or when the losing side can't stand anymore. Which comes first depends on the day. And yet, here's the strangeness. They'll line up to do it again tomorrow. For the ransom of a fine horse, for the chance at a purse of silver, for a scrap of fame that might last until the next feast day. But there is another way to risk life and limb for applause. Not with a mob in armor, but with two riders, two lances, and the hope that a splintered shaft will be the worst of your worries. If the melee is a storm, then jousting is a straight line into it. Two riders. Two lances. One rail down the middle to keep the horses from killing each other before the men have the chance. The field feels different here, quieter, at least until the charge. You stand near the tilt barrier, close enough to smell the horses. It's a deep, hot scent that clings to wool and stays in your throat. Grooms lead the destriers out, their hooves muffled on sand, their ears twitching at the murmur of the crowd. The knights are dressed as if stepping into a painted window, polished helms with narrow slits, shields with bright devices, surcoats stitched in silk that will be shredded in minutes. The herald calls their names, his voice steady, as though he were announcing the start of a harmless game. They take their places. Each rider shifts in the saddle, testing the weight of the lance, the pull of the reins. The lance tips are rebated, thick, blunt ends meant to prevent killing. You've heard how safe this makes it. Then someone nearby mentions the knight last year who went home with a piece of lance lodged under his chin. The trumpet sounds thin and sharp. The horses launch forward, the ground trembling under you. The lances lower, the shields rise. There's a moment where the whole world is the space between two riders, closing faster than you can blink. Impact. A cracking sound, not like wood but like ice breaking on a frozen pond. Shards of lance fly sideways, one piece tumbling end over end into the rail. The Red Knight stays upright, his opponent reels back in the saddle, then drops hard into the dirt, the air leaving his body in a gasp the crowd can hear. Handlers rush in, but the fallen rider is already on one knee, shaking his head as if to clear water from his ears. His horse dances sideways, eyes white. The victor circles back, lifts his lance in salute, though the shaft is now half its length. The herald's voice rises again, calling for the next pair, as though what you just saw was an ordinary thing. A purse of silver waits for the winner. Sometimes, so does the loser, if he can claim a ransom for his horse or armor. Other times, the cost is paid in weeks of stiff necks and meals taken standing. Beyond the rail, the crowd shifts, hungry for the next tilt. They don't see the bruises blooming under mail, the taste of blood when a man swallows. They see color, motion, impact. And if the tilt seems too tidy, too contained, there are other pastimes that stretch far beyond the field, into forests where the quarry bites back, and where the line between sport and funeral is thinner still. You learn quickly that a boar hunt begins long before you see the animal. It begins in the cold breath of the dogs straining at their leashes, in the stamping of hooves as riders shift in their saddles, in the weight of a spear that feels far too light for what it must stop. The forest holds its own kind of silence. Not the absence of sound, but a silence made of many small ones, twigs flexing, leaves settling, distant water moving under ice. Somewhere ahead, the hounds catch a scent, their bodies rigid, ears forward. One whines, a high, tight note that makes the squire beside you glance over with something too quick to be a smile. They tell you the boar is dangerous because it is clever. That it will not run forever, but will turn suddenly, charging the lion that chases it. Lords call this sport. The men on foot know it as work, and dangerous work at that. You follow a narrow track, damp under fallen leaves. The smell here is sharp, wet soil, the iron tang of your own sweat under wool, and the faint musk of the animal you hunt. Someone ahead raises a hand. The dogs surge, the horn sounds once, low and long. It happens faster than you expect. A shadow in the undergrowth becomes a dark shape, then a moving mass of bristle and muscle. The boar bursts into view, its snout wet, tusks flashing in a shaft of weak winter light. The dogs fling themselves forward, snapping, and are tossed aside as if made of straw. One lands hard, yelps, and scrabbles back, limping. The riders close in, trying to cut off its path. You see the spear points angled down, the wood flexing under the push of shoulders and arms. The crosspiece just below the blade is meant to stop the boar from running up the shaft into the man who holds it. Meant to, but not always enough. The first thrust misses, striking only air and the edge of a tusk. The second finds its mark, sinking into the thick hide at the shoulder. The boar screams, not a sound you knew it could make, and twists, breaking the shaft clean in two. A third spear catches it low, and suddenly it is on its side, legs kicking, churning leaves into dark, wet clumps. The men on foot move quickly, their knives flashing as they finish what the spears began. One of them wipes his blade on the ground before standing. His breath is loud, uneven. He has blood on his cheek that isn't his. The dogs are called back, their sides heaving, tongues dark with mud and blood. The wounded one is lifted into a cart, its eyes half closed. Somewhere behind you, a lord laughs, already telling the story as if it were a game of chess he had just won. The carcass is hauled onto a sledge. The bristles are stiff under the gloved hands that grip them. You catch the smell again, stronger now, heavier, the scent of something that fought until it couldn't. Around you, the forest begins to sound like itself again. A bird calls from somewhere above. The leaves rustle without urgency. The dogs quiet, though their eyes still track the sledge as it is pulled away. There will be meat for the haul, a head to mount, a story to repeat until it becomes something smoother, cleaner, and far less true. But the men who walked beside the boar today will remember the weight in their arms, the sound in their ears, and the fact that it could have gone the other way. And not all beasts are caught in the forest. Some are chained in the open, in pits dug for the pleasure of a crowd, where the danger has nowhere to run but forward. The first thing you notice is the smell. It's not the sweet, grassy scent of a market square on a warm day, or the smoke from a cook's fire. It's heavier, more urgent, a thick blend of animal sweat, wet rope, old blood, and the sharp tang of iron from the ring stakes. You're standing at the edge of the pit. It's not deep, just enough so the crowd can lean over without falling in, their elbows pressed on the rail. A rope ring is set inside, taut between wooden posts, and in the center, the chain. The chain is short. That's the point. People press in shoulder to shoulder, merchants in fur beside laborers with raw, cracked hands. A boy threads through the bodies selling hot ale in clay cups, sloshing it with each step. Bets are muttered, shouted, sealed with coins passed palm to palm. You hear numbers, livestock, even a pair of boots wagered with solemn nods. The handlers bring the bear in first. Its coat is a patchwork of thick fur and scars, its head low, eyes watching the ground as though it knows the shape of this place. The chain is fastened to a ring at its neck, and the sound of the link striking the post is louder than it should be. Someone behind you spits, muttering that this one looks slow. Then the dogs arrive. Lean, muscle-corded, tails stiff. They strain against their leads, nails scraping the planks as they're pulled toward the pit. The bear lifts its head once, briefly, and the motion ripples through the crowd like wind through dry grass. The horn blows, and the dogs are loosed. They rush in from two sides, jaws open, voices high and savage. The bear turns slow at first, swiping one away with the forelegs so heavy it seems to move the air itself. The dog yelps, rolls, and is up again, limping but still barking. The crowd roars, not in fear, but in delight. A man near you pounds the rail with his fist, shouting odds to anyone who will take them. Someone else laughs when the chain pulls tight, jerking the bear backward mid-lunge. A rope near the edge snaps, just the outer ring, not the main chain, and for a heartbeat, the handlers freeze. One of the dogs veers too close to the brake and has to be hauled back by its collar. The crowd surges forward, then back, a wave of boots and skirts shifting on the packed earth. Blood appears early. A streak on the bear's shoulder where a dog's teeth have found purchase. A red foam at the edge of a dog's mouth where the bear's paw landed hard. The smell thickens, salt and copper under the animal musk. The handlers clap and shout, driving the dogs in again, and again the bear turns, faster now, head low, teeth flashing. You can see its breath in the cold air, each exhale a cloud. The chain rattles with each pivot, ringing like a dull bell. When it ends suddenly. One dog is pulled up by the scruff, bleeding from the flank. The bear, panting, stands in the center, swaying slightly. A handler moves in with a hook to lead it away, the chain scraping along the boards. The noise from the crowd softens into conversation, wagers settled, complaints about the pace, calls for more ale. And here's the strange part. The faces in the pit change, but the pattern doesn't. Tomorrow it might be a bull, horns wrapped in leather, eyes rolling white as it meets the rush of dogs. The smell will be the same, the bets will be the same, and the ring rope will hold, until it doesn't. Not all contests here are between man and beast. Some pits are made for men to face each other, not as sport, but as judgment, with the crowd just as eager to see who walks away and who doesn't. The ring is quiet in a way that makes the skin prickle. Not the silence of respect, nor the silence of fear, more like the pause before a dice cup is tipped, when every man in the room is leaning forward. You stand among townspeople pressed in a half-circle around the ropes. This isn't the great field of a tournament, no banners or noble galleries. Just a patch of hard earth trampled flat, a rope ring sagging between stakes, and two men in the center who would rather be anywhere else. One is accused. You've heard the crime in whispers, stolen grain, or perhaps a knife fight after ale, the details shift with each retelling. The other is his accuser, or the man standing in his place. They don't look so different, both with rough hands, patched tunics under leather jerkins, a stiffness in their stance that comes from knowing the ground beneath them may be the last they stand on. A priest waits just outside the rope, holding a wooden cross and a relic wrapped in linen. He murmurs to himself, perhaps to God, perhaps to no one. The crowd leans in, breath visible in the cold, eyes fixed on the space between the two men. The weapons are not matched. One holds a mace, its head dented, the other a long sword whose edge has seen better days. This is no sport with balanced arms, this is whatever could be found or borrowed. The marshal, a man in a faded surcoat, calls out the charge, the defense, the blessing. Then he steps back. They circle. The ground crunches under their boots. Someone in the crowd coughs, loud in the stillness, and it almost makes you flinch. The first blow is not clean, a sideways swing that glances off a raised forearm. The second lands harder, the mace connecting with a dull thud against the side of a shoulder. The accused stumbles, rights himself, brings his sword up in an awkward arc. His breath is fast now, showing white in the morning air. The crowd shifts and murmurs with each move, the tension in their voices as sharp as the weapons. There's a moment, brief, but enough, when the two men lock together, weapons caught, eyes inches apart. You can't hear what's said, if anything. Then they break apart, and the fight resumes, slower now, the weight of each strike dragging at their arms. When it ends, it is not in triumph. The mace lands square against the ribs, and the man with the sword goes down hard, his weapon clattering to the dirt. He lies still, save for the rise and fall of his chest. The marshal steps in, lifting a hand to signal the verdict. The crowd exhales as one. Some nod, as though satisfied, others look away. The priest kneels beside the fallen man, murmuring words only he can hear. The victor steps back, lowering his weapon, his face unreadable. The ropes sag as the crowd disperses, conversations already turning to the weather, the price of grain, the next market day. Justice has been served, they'll say. The truth has been found, they'll say. But the truth in the dirt is simpler. One man walks away, and one does not. And sometimes the fight is not born of crime at all, but of pride, of a night's whim to challenge all comers, standing on a bridge or at a gate, with the river or the stone waiting below. The bridge is not wide. Just enough for two horses to pass if both riders lean in, their knees brushing. Which makes it the perfect place for a man with a sense of honor, or a taste for wagers, to plant his shield and dare anyone to ride by without testing their luck. You see him there now, a knight in a sun-faded surcoat, his visor up, the edge of his beard catching the wind. The shield hangs on a hook at the bridge's midpoint, its painted surface scarred from weeks of use. Above him, pennants snap in the breeze, their colors marking him as the challenger. The rules are simple, though they sound less so when spoken aloud. Any rider wishing to cross must take a blow or give one. Lances for the bold, swords for the stubborn, and sometimes just the force of the shoulder in passing. Few turn back. To refuse is to admit something, cowardice, or worse, poverty. Below, the river foams cold and fast, a green-gray thread knotted with white water. You can hear it even over the shuffle of hooves on stone. On either bank, townsfolk linger, leaning on the rails, whispering guesses about who will fall today. The baker's wife has a loaf on the outcome. The miller is said to have wagered a jug of his best ale. The first challenger of the day is no lord, just a merchant's son, his armor more polished than tested. He rides stiffly, lance too high, eyes fixed on the far end as though willing himself there by sight alone. The two meet at the midpoint with a sharp clap of wood on wood. The boy's lance wavers, slides, and the next instant he is swaying, nearly unseated. His opponent pulls up just enough to keep him in the saddle, the blow a lesson rather than a defeat. Not all passes are so gentle. A later tilt sends one rider sideways into the rail, his horse scrambling, hind hooves striking sparks from the stone. The crowd gasps, the river roars below, and for a moment you imagine the weight of armor pulling a man under. Between bouts, the challenger rests against the rail, sharing a drink with his squire, helmet tilted back to let the wind cool his brow. His voice is low, unhurried. This is work, but also theater, a way to collect ransoms from those with more pride than skill. The sun shifts, throwing the bridge into shadow, and another rider approaches, this one with a crest you recognize, a mark of some petty feud that will play itself out here in steel. The air tightens, the crowd draws closer. The horses step in time, the lances lower, and the space between them vanishes. When it ends, one man sits tall, his lance raised in salute. The other grips the rail to steady himself, helmet bent low. Coins change hands. The squire hangs another dented shield on the hook, its surface already bearing the story of the day. It's all ceremony until the blow lands wrong, until a man hits the stones and does not rise quickly. Then the laughter fades, the crowd shifts uneasily, and the river keeps moving as though nothing happened. And if the bridge seems too solid a stage, there are games played on surfaces far less forgiving, where the ground is fire itself, and the challenge is to leap it before it leaps you. By the time the sun dips low, the fire is already taller than a man. It's fed all day, cartloads of brush, split logs, the odd piece of furniture too broken for repair but too sound to rot. Children drag sticks in circles around its base, tracing patterns in the dirt, while their parents barter for ale or sweet cakes from makeshift stalls. The smell is everywhere. Wood smoke thick enough to cling to your hair, to settle into the seams of your clothes. It mingles with roasting meat, spilled beer, the faint sourness of sweat from bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. Somewhere a fiddler tests his bow against the strings, the high, thin notes barely cutting through the roar of the flames. The leaping hasn't begun yet. For now, people watch the fire like they would a storyteller, waiting for the moment when it's hot enough, high enough, to make the jump worth boasting about. Young men pace at the edge, stamping their feet, testing their legs. The older ones stand further back, remembering when they thought luck could be taken in a single bound. When it starts quickly. A boy no older than 16 breaks from the circle, runs 3 steps, and springs over the outer lick of flame, his boots striking dirt on the far side. The crowd cheers, he grins, hands on knees, breathing hard. The next is bolder, going closer to the heart of the fire where the heat makes the skin prickle even from where you stand. Sparks catch on his trousers as he lands. He slaps at them, laughing, though the wool has blackened. There's a rhythm to it, one leap, then another, the air between them filled with music and shouts. A girl runs in barefoot, skirts hitched high, her hair catching a glow as she rises and falls. The smell of singed cloth follows her back into the crowd. But the missteps come, as they always do. A man stumbles on the takeoff, his foot catching on the edge of a log that shifts in the fire. He clears it, but only just, the hem of his tunic smoldering until his friends beat it out with their hands. Another lands awkwardly, twisting an ankle, his grin tight with pain as he limps away. The fire keeps growing. It pops and sighs, embers drifting upward like a slow flock of birds. The heat presses at your face, making the eyes water. Those who've already leapt stand to one side, flushed and exhilarated, telling each other how close they came to the center. Each story grows in the telling. Children are coaxed to bed, pulled away by parents with firm grips, while the bolder ones linger at the edges, watching the older youths test themselves. Somewhere, a drunk tries twice to run at the fire and turns back both times, earning jeers from his friends. The leap is said to bring luck for the year ahead, to burn away sickness and misfortune. Maybe it does. Or maybe it just leaves you with the smell of smoke in your hair and a racing heart, proof enough that you faced the flames and came out the other side. And when the fire burns down to a bed of embers, there will be other contests, ones where the heat is not from the flames, but from the crush of bodies in narrow streets, all shoving a single ball toward a goal no one can quite see. It doesn't begin with a whistle. It begins with a sound like a market breaking apart, shouts, the scrape of boots on cobble, the crash of something wooden hitting stone. Then the shape of it comes into view, a shifting, heaving knot of men pushing against each other, with a leather ball somewhere in the middle. The street is not cleared for this. Stalls still stand, their canvas roofs flapping as someone is shoved too close. A barrel rolls into the gutter, splashing brackish water over a pair of boys clinging to a doorway. Dogs weave between legs, barking until someone kicks at them. You watch from the relative safety of a low wall, feeling each surge of the mob as it passes. The ball itself is rarely visible. More often, you see only the effect of its movement, the front of the press lurching forward, the back scrambling to keep up. There are no teams here, only sides, and those sides are defined by birthplace, by street, by whatever you can shout before someone shoves you in the ribs. The sound is constant. Boots slamming down, men grunting, the occasional sharp crack of two heads colliding. A cabbage cart tips, its load scattering underfoot to be crushed into a green pulp. Somewhere a woman yells from an upper window, her voice lost in the roar. Every so often, the ball is forced out into the open, a scuffed, dark sphere slick with mud. Hands grab for it, a boot sends it skidding, and the mass changes direction with a violence that makes you step back. Those on the edge are swept inward, their protests ignored. There's no set field. The goal might be a marker at the far edge of town, or simply, as far as we can push it. The ball rolls over ditches, through puddles, over the feet of anyone too slow to move. One man is knocked flat, the weight of three others pinning him until they're dragged away by the current of the game. He gets up, dazed, spitting mud from his mouth, and throws himself back in. Spectators are not safe. A sudden swerve sends the ball into the wall below you, and in the scramble that follows, hands reach up, gripping your boots for leverage. Someone else is hauled down from a fence, laughing until he hits the ground. Fights break out and dissolve without stopping the play. An elbow thrown too hard, a shirt torn, a knee driven into a thigh, then both men are caught up again in the push toward the unseen goal. It's as much brawl as game, the lines between them lost in the noise and the movement. Hours pass like this, the street wearing down under the assault. Mud is churned into the cobbles, bits of broken crate and dropped goods litter the path. Faces are smeared with dirt, hair plastered to foreheads with sweat. The air smells of leather ale, and the sharp tang of iron from skinned knuckles. When it ends, it's not with a clear victory. The ball disappears into the courtyard of an alehouse, the press of bodies breaking apart as quickly as it formed. Men stagger away, some laughing, some nursing bruises. Coins change hands over disputed outcomes. The street remains in its wake, trampled, muddied, and oddly quiet now. A boy finds the ball, half deflated, and tucks it under his arm as if it were treasure. The dogs return, sniffing at the ground where the noise once was. And as the day fades, the town will ready itself for the next gathering, a celebration where danger hides behind music and costume, where steel flashes in time to the drum and a single misstep turns dance into injury. It begins with music. Not the quiet strum of a lute or the measured steps of a court pavane, but something sharper, fiddles sawing fast, drums beating in a way that makes the air in your chest vibrate. The crowd gathers in a loose circle on the cobbled square, drawn as much by the sound as by the shimmer of steel catching the afternoon light. At first it looks like play. A half-dozen men in festival clothes, bright sashes, bells sewn to their boots, step in time, weaving between one another. The swords they carry are long and narrow, polished so well they catch the sun like mirrors. They spin them in slow arcs, pass them hand to hand, tap them against the cobbles for rhythm. Children at the front lean forward, eyes wide. Then the tempo changes. The steps quicken, the arcs of steel draw tighter. A man ducks low as another sweeps a blade just above his back. The crowd gasps, then laughs, thinking it part of the show. You can see the edge is real, no dull shimmer, but the fine, sharp glint of something meant to cut. Sweat beads on brows, catching in beards, running down the backs of necks. The dancer's breathing grows louder, almost keeping time with the drums. The bells on their boots jingle in uneven bursts as feet slide, pivot, stamp. The air smells of dust kicked up from the stones, of oiled steel, of ale from mugs clutched by onlookers. There is no barrier between the performers and the crowd. A step too far, a misgrip, and a sword could arc outward. It happens sometimes. Once, a blade slips from a hand slick with sweat, clattering at the feet of a butcher who kicks it back in with a grin. Laughter ripples, but there's a nervous edge to it. The centerpiece comes when they form the star. Each man grips his sword by the hilt and the flat, linking them overhead into a woven shape, the points meeting in the center. They raise it high, circling slowly, then lower it as one until it rests just above the ground. The steps around it are intricate, the risk constant. A single misstep could slice a calf, split a boot. Somewhere behind you, a voice murmurs about a cousin who limped for months after. A harmless midsummer jig. You glance back and see the speaker smiling as he says it, but his hand tightens around his cup. The dancers break formation, blades flashing again in paired routines. Two men face each other, blades tapping in a rhythm almost like speech. Parry, sweep, tap, spin. The sound is sharper now, the ring of steel on steel carrying over the music. The fiddler grins, bow flying faster, the drummer's hands a blur. Then it happens. A slip. Barely noticeable at first, a blade coming down a fraction too early, catching the edge of a partner's sleeve. The cloth tears, a thin red line blooming on the skin beneath. The man's jaw tightens, but he keeps moving, stepping back into time with the next measure. The crowd cheers louder, mistaking composure for part of the act. By the final notes, they are slick with sweat, chests heaving. The swords are raised in salute, their points angled toward the sky, then lowered together in a clink against the cobbles. Coins are thrown into a cap held out by one of the younger men, clinking silver, dull copper, even a small token carved from bone. The crowd drifts away, voices high with praise, the sound of the music still ringing in their ears. The dancers wipe their blades clean, check the edges for nicks, and sheath them without ceremony. They've done this before. They'll do it again. And as the square empties, the smell of dust and steel lingers, fading into the richer scent of brewing ale from the tavern nearby, where another kind of contest will play out before night's end, one with no music to guide the blows and no applause when it's done. The tavern's door is never quite closed. It hangs just open enough for the sound to spill out, low voices at first, then the sharper peaks of laughter, the scrape of chairs, the thump of a mug set down harder than needed. The smell hits you before the warmth does, a blend of yeast, smoke, wet wool, and the sour tang of spilled ale that's seeped into the floorboards over years. Inside, the light is gold but dim, caught in the haze of smoke that drifts low from the rafters. Shadows move against the walls, broad shoulders leaning in over dice, hands gesturing wide over a story, heads tilting back for a long swallow. The heat is close, the kind that makes you loosen your collar without thinking. At first it's just noise. A cheer when someone wins a throw, groans when the dice turn against them. Coins change hands, mugs are refilled. Then, in one corner, voices rise. Not loud enough to stop the room, but enough to draw eyes. Two men sit across from each other, a pile of coins between them, and a game that's clearly gone badly for one. The shift is subtle. A hand slaps the table, rattling the mugs. Chairs scrape back. One man stands, the other pushes up to meet him. The barman glances over, weighing whether to intervene or let it burn itself out. It begins with a shove. The kind that's half challenge, half drunken misjudgment of strength. The other man answers with one of his own, harder, and the room sharpens. The music, if there was any, stops. A stool tips and falls with a hollow bang. They grapple, hands clutching at wool tunics, feet sliding on the sawdust-strewn floor. Someone laughs, too loud, egging them on. A mug is knocked over, the dark ale spreading across the table and dripping onto the floor. The smell of it rises, mingling with the sweat and wood smoke. The first blow lands, a clumsy hook to the ribs. The other answers with a head that leaves both blinking, one clutching his brow. The crowd forms quickly, a loose ring that shifts with each stumble and sway. Bets are made in mutters, coins changing hands behind cupped palms. There's no clean rhythm to it. They break apart, circle, come together again in a tangle of limbs. A chair is caught between them and splinters, sending one man backward into the lap of an unlucky onlooker. The onlooker shoves him off, and now three are involved. Knives appear sometimes. Not always to use, more often as a threat, a flash of steel to end the fight before it tips too far. Tonight, one glints briefly in the lamplight before a friend pushes the wielder's arm down, hissing in his ear. The blade vanishes, but the tension doesn't. By now the barman is moving, heavy steps deliberate, voice low but edged. He's done this before. A hand on one shoulder, a grip on an arm, a twist that forces a man to bend without quite toppling him. The fight doesn't so much end as unravel, the combatants muttering curses as they're steered toward opposite corners. The crowd eases, the ring breaking apart. Mugs are righted, fresh sawdust is scattered over the wet spots. A tooth is found near the hearth and kicked into the embers. Someone starts a song, off-key but loud enough to reset the air in the room. By the time the barman wipes the counter clean, it's as though it never happened, except for the split lip here, the swelling eye there, the bruise that will bloom dark by morning. Those are souvenirs, like the coins lost in the first wager that started it all. And outside, the night waits. There are pastimes under open sky, too, where danger rides on feathered wings and the ground itself can turn against you in a blink. Dawn holds the field a little longer than day will. Dew beads on grass like pins of glass, soaking hems and fetlocks. The glove on your left hand is heavier than it looks, thick, oiled leather, the wrist cinched tight. On it sits a small weight that is not small at all, yellow feet, a blur of barred breast, a curved beak still as a hook. Under the hood, the falcon's lidless stare sleeps, Two tiny bells at her ankles make a sound like coins breathed rather than struck. Grooms murmur to horses stamping steam into the morning. Cinches are checked, a finger slid beneath a girth, a buckled strap tugged once more for luck. Someone flicks blood-warm meat onto the lure and folds it like a flower. The smell finds you, iron and grease over the sweeter tang of trampled time. Courtly sport, they call it. It feels more like carrying fire on your wrist while sitting a barrel with 4 legs. The hood comes off with a twist of knotted silk. Light pins the falcon's eye. The pupils shrink to cold coins. She lifts against your glove, wings testing air that isn't quite day yet. The bells chime once. A hair shows itself where the field leans into scrub, a brown seam opening in the grass. The falconer's voice is a thread, soft, even, but the word is a knife, now. The throw is a whole-body thing. Shoulder, elbow, hand, the wrist turning so the bird goes into wind rather than against it. Weight leaves you. The glove rises, suddenly empty and clumsy. A white drop, light on feather, falls and becomes speed. Bells vanish into distance. The horses all breathe at once. You move. Not because there is need of you yet, but because the body believes it. Hooves thud soft on damp ground, a clod smacks a boot, leather creaks, a bit rings. The falcon stoops, misses, recovers in a heartbeat your eyes can't measure. She is above the hair again, the earth's own breath pulling and throwing the low thing in quick lines that do not look like running so much as disappearing and reappearing across uneven thought. There are dangers you are trained to notice. A rotten rabbit warren that takes a fetlock, a flint that will slice a frog, a hedge that hides a ditch. And there are the ones you learn by injury. The sudden scream when a hawk breaks into sound so close a horse decides the world is ending. Today it is the second kind. The destrier under the Lord chews at his iron and then chooses away, muscle turning into flight the way the bird turned into it a moment ago. A groom reaches for the rein and gets rope burn across his palm. Another throws himself at the bit, and is hauled along like a sack. The horse finds a hole and does not fall, which somehow worsens it. Now it bolts clean. You feel the bolt in your ribs though it is not your horse, the world's pattern altered by an animal's simple idea to be elsewhere. The Lord sits it until he doesn't. He comes off not cleanly but by degrees, first the seat, then a hip, then a slow roll that ends with breath pushed out of him like water from a skin. The sound he makes is the sound men make when they cannot yet choose between swearing and laughing. The falcon does not care. Above the tumble, her bells are thin silver in a sky the color of pewter. Someone catches the loose horse at a tuft where the field lifts, where the hedgerow snags rain leather like thorns snag ideas. Hands soothe its neck. There. The big head lowers and blows a question into the groom's sleeve. The Lord sits up by increments, one palm pressed under his ribs as if something might fall out if he forgets to hold it in. Later, he will call it bruising. Tonight he will take his meat standing. The falcon drops again. She hits the hair not as a hammer but as gravity with claws. The strike is a thud you feel more than hear. Dust jumps, grass flattens, the bells stop being distance and start being weight. By the time you reach her, she is all intent, the mantle spread to hide her work, the head turning with that not quite human precision that reads as disdain. The lure is flicked, turned, shown, meat richer than what lies under her feet, and she steps to it because she has learned that stepping to it is safer than not. The jesses rasp once across your glove. Breath returns to the morning. Someone mentions price because someone always does. The hawk is worth a tenant's year and the horse too, the hood stitched by a man who could eat a month on such stitching, the bells traded for in a port you will never see. A stoop is a purse if the story lands well, a broken girth is a debt, a broken rib a prayer. Old men at court speak of gyres and grace as if feathers were proof of virtue. In the field, the math is simpler, a loose strap, a hole in the ground, and a scream that can turn calm into running. You ride a little more sober after that. The hedges wear mourning like beads, the skylarks insist on a song no one asked for, the falcon rips and swallows and looks ancient doing it. When she is done, the hood returns. She stiffens under its darkness, then remembers the shape of being carried and settles to the weight you knew at dawn. Back at the mews, the air is different, damp straw, old meat, the almost medicinal smell of cured leather. Birds blink in wooden shadows. A boy scrapes droppings from a perch with the focus of a clerk counting coins. The master falconer weighs the hawk on a brass scale that sings as it settles and says nothing at all because numbers have a louder voice than praise. The bells, white, whisper against your palm. There is, in all of it, a hush that feels like nobility trying to behave itself, danger dressed in velvet, hazard that asks permission. Still, the world finds its way to bruise you. A stirrup leather fails not because it was weak, but because a fox changed its mind. A rabbit hole opens where no hole was yesterday. A falcon decides the wind is wrong and goes high until she is only a freckle on the day. You stand there with an empty glove, arm aching from holding nothing, listening for bells you can't hear. When she returns, she drops out of nowhere, sudden as regret. The glove shakes when she takes it. The hood goes on. You remember to breathe without noticing it. Not all balances of weight and fall are made on dry land. Some ask you to stand where standing trembles, to trade earth for water, wood for wake, and trust a pole to keep you upright while cold current waits to pull you under. The river looks slow from the bank. Flat light moves over its surface like brushed pewter, hiding the muscle underneath. From here you can't see the currents pull against the bridge piles or feel the chill that waits just below the skin of the day. But you will. Boats nose out from the reeds one by one, flat-bottomed things with low sides that were darkened by years of water. Men stand on them in pairs, bareheaded or in simple caps, each with a long pole resting light in the crook of one arm. The pole ends in a blunt iron head, not sharp enough to pierce, but heavy enough to drive breath from the body or knock a man clean over. There is no crowd without shouting. On the banks, boys scramble over each other for a better view, slipping in the mud. Women lean on the railings of the bridge, skirts hiked a little to keep from the wet. Traders and passing barges call wagers to anyone listening. The smell is half riverweed, half wood smoke from cooking fires somewhere out of sight. When the signal comes, it isn't a trumpet or drum but a single hand raised by a man with more gray in his beard than teeth in his mouth. The first two boats push out into the middle, oars pulling in short, sharp strokes. They turn until they face each other, the width of the river between them. The men at the stern brace, plant their feet wide, and start poling forward. The water makes its own rules. A wake from an upstream barge reaches them at the midpoint, sending both decks into a sway that travels up the legs of the justers like a warning. They lean into it, points lowering. The distance closes. For a moment the only sound is water slapping wood. Then the poles meet. It isn't the clean clash of lance on shield. It's a muffled, almost wooden crack followed by the grunt of impact. One man holds his footing, the other steps back, too far. His heel finds the very edge of the deck and there's nowhere else to go. He goes over in a flail of arms, the river taking him without a splash loud enough to satisfy the crowd. He surfaces quickly, but the cold is a fist. His gasp sprays water. His hands slap at the boat's side until another man hauls him in. The winner lifts his pole in salute, though his own knees still tremble from keeping balance. Coins change hands on the bank. More boats push out. Some men are quick to close the gap, striking with speed before the water has a chance to play its tricks. Others circle, letting the current bring them together like driftwood in a bend. The fights are never the same. One ends in a mutual fall, both men bobbing like corks while their boats drift empty toward the bridge. Another ends before it begins, a pole skimming harmlessly over a ducking opponent's head as he sidesteps to safety. The river's smell deepens as the day warms, mud stirred up from the bottom, green weed snagged on oar blades. Clothes cling to the losers when they're pulled back in, wool and linen gone 2 shades darker with wet. Teeth chatter even in the sun. A boy runs along the bank with a bundle of dry shirts for rent, charging more than they're worth and getting it anyway. Every so often, the water claims more than just pride. A pole slips loose and floats away downstream, spinning lazily until it's caught on a snag. A boat hooks its edge on a hidden rock, tilting far enough to send both crew and Juicer into the drink. Once, a man surfaces coughing without his cap, which appears later on the bridge, claimed by a boy who refuses to give it back. By late afternoon, the light has shifted. The banks cast longer shadows, the bridge's timbers smell sharper as they warm. The last match is always the same, the 2 best from the day's bouts, both standing in boats, already marked by boot scuffs and the round dents of pole ends. They push off slow, saving their strength for the moment it matters. When it comes, it's sudden, a meeting of wood and muscle that rocks both boats hard enough to make the crowd gasp. One man drops to one knee but recovers. The other takes a single step back and finds only air. He goes in sideways, striking the surface with a slap that echoes off the bridge. His opponent stays upright, just, the pole lowered in quiet acknowledgement. The winner gets a purse, heavy enough to make the leather sag in the master's hand. But he also gets the last look at the river, smooth again now, as if it hadn't just swallowed 6 men for sport. And tomorrow, there will be horses again, and narrow roads, and the long gamble of setting out for holy ground with nothing to guard you but faith. The road doesn't begin at the edge of town. It begins in the tavern, or in the churchyard, or under the eaves of a stable where 3 men are arguing over how many loaves will last a week. It begins with a story told too often, of a shrine far enough away to sound miraculous, where a saint once breathed over water and turned it sweet, or where a relic rests in a box of silver said to cure any ailment worth the trouble of walking to it. The company is never quite decided. Some join because they believe, others because they owe someone a debt and would rather be out of reach for a season. One goes because his sister says the saint might grant her a child. Another goes because he hears the taverns along the road are better than the ones here. At first, the road feels kind. Spring grass at the ditches, birds feeding in the hedgerows. Boots still new enough to hold their shape, straps tight on the pack. Someone whistles, though not well. The days stretch, and the whistle dies. Meals become bread softened in water, onions eaten raw. A wineskin passed around at night loses its warmth by morning. The road's dust clings to everything, inside the folds of cloaks, in the seams of boots, in the throat. They sleep where they can. Sometimes in barns, the smell of dung thick but warmer than the wind. Sometimes under hedges, listening to the wet shuffle of something unseen in the grass. A fire is a luxury. When they risk one, they sit with their backs to it, faces to the dark, watching for movement. Bandits are spoken of as if they are only another kind of weather, something you plan for but cannot stop. One night voices drift in from the road, low and steady, not hurrying. The company freezes, hands on knives that are more for cutting bread than flesh. The voices pass without slowing. Only after they are gone does anyone breathe loud again. Hunger sharpens. Coins vanish faster than the miles. A man sells the extra shirt he carried for a lump of cheese hard enough to crack a tooth. Another trades his good boots for a pair of worn ones and a night indoors. When they reach the pass, winter is early. Snow clots in the hollows of the path, and the wind there tastes of stone. Each step sounds too loud, as if the mountains might hear and decide against letting them through. At the top, someone laughs, not because it's funny, but because breath in the cold comes out strange. On the other side, the land tilts toward the shrine. The roads are narrower here, the villages fewer. The stories told in taverns are older, and the eyes that watch from doorways follow you longer. But the shrine is real, stone worn smooth by hands, candles guttering in glass, a smell of wax and wet cloth. The relic itself is no larger than a fist. It rests behind iron, the silver box dented where someone once tried to pry it open. They kneel. They touch their foreheads to the stone. Some leave coins, others only a moment of stillness. One man presses a folded scrap of cloth to the box, then ties it to his belt as if the knot itself might hold a blessing. The way back feels different. Feet are slower, the air heavier. They have the shrine behind them now, and the same dangers ahead. But there's a change, thin as the frost on morning grass, that comes from having gone and returned. They tell each other they will do it again. They almost mean it. By the time they see their own town's rooftops, the journey has been sanded down into stories worth telling over ale. Fever, cold, hunger, these are forgotten in favor of the moment the relic shone just so, or when the wind through the past sounded like singing. Some adventures end at home. Others end with a show of light and fire in a lord's hall, where alchemy promises wonder and delivers burns as easily as miracles. You wait at the back of the great hall where the smoke collects. The rushes have been changed, but the floor still smells of old ale, wax, and damp wool. Tapestries hang like quiet forests, their dyed leaves holding the day's chill. At the far end, beneath the painted beams, a long table has been cleared. On it, glass that looks too thin for fire, little paper twists tied like sweets, a mortar still dusted white, a brazier breathing a low red. The alchemist moves as if the air were heavier around him. He touches every vessel twice, taps every stoppered flask with a fingernail, listens for a note only he seems to hear. His apprentice, small and careful, carries a tray lined with sand where short fuses lie coiled like sleeping worms. Someone has strewn rosemary on the coals, but it cannot drown the sour of vinegar and the sharp, meat-like edge of brimstone. A clerk whispers that the Lord has paid 3 marks for this night's wonder. You think what else 3 marks might buy: a winter's grain, a decent horse, 2 years of a page's living if the page is frugal. The hall darkens by degrees. Candles are snuffed near the walls, shutters are drawn to tame the wind. The alchemist raises a hand, not grandly, just enough. His voice is low and even. The first mixture is small, a paper cone set into a cup of clay, a single thread of fuse licking toward it. When it goes with surprise rather than violence. A flower of sparks in quiet gold, rising a hand's breadth and falling like warm rain onto the sand. People breathe out. Shoulders loosen. It seems safe. He works in measured steps. A fountain that hisses steadily and throws white fire the height of a man. A wheel of thin wood that spins on an iron pin, chalking circles of light against a board. The colors are modest: straw, cream, a blush near orange where the heat runs hottest. Each piece leaves its mark: a soot ring on the board, a scatter of black seeds on the table, a sweet bitter taste on the back of the tongue. The apprentice turns spent papers with tongs, checking for embers. His hands are reddened from heat, nails rimmed gray with powder. Glass is next. A retort nested in sand, a narrow neck glistening with something that breathes when warmed. The alchemist feeds the brazier with 2 chips of charcoal and waits. Waiting is most of the craft. A thin thread of vapor finds the air and wraps itself in lamplight. You feel it in your nose before you see it with your eyes. He tilts the neck over a dish. A drop falls and bites the copper coin set there, lifting a small, green smoke that makes the nearest lady turn her face into her shawl. The hall murmurs. This is not beauty, This is power explained by stain and smell. The show returns to Sparks. He sets a row, 6 paper pots bedded in damp sand, fuses braided from tow and salt water, each separated by a finger's width of safety he trusts more than you do. He lights the far one and steps back slowly, counting under his breath. One goes, then the next, a steady ladder toward the center where the largest cone sits. Its paper is thicker, the tie neater, the base heavier with clay. It should lift, then crack, then pour silver like rain. It nearly does. The sound is wrong. A dull cough instead of a clean tear. The cone bulges at the seam and opens sideways. For a moment there is only white, too bright to look at, too fast to avoid. The nearest page flinches and raises his hands. When the light drops, his palms show a scatter of angry stars, red and wet. He bites his lip hard to stop a shout. The apprentice is already there with the wet rag kept for this very thing, pressing, murmuring the rhythm people use to steady frightened animals. The smell shifts from fire to cooked wool and sweet skin. You hear the Lord's chair scrape. No one moves further. A seamstress near the door begins to cry without sound. The alchemist does not bow yet. He closes the brazier's lid, covers the tray, snuffs 2 stray fuses with wetted fingers. The gestures are plain and careful, a man tidying a table after meat has been carved. Only when the room's breath evens does he incline his head. The words are modest. The fault will be mended. The mixture will be gentled. He promises the safer miracle tomorrow. He does not promise the same wonder, because the hall has just learned what wonder costs. Coins are still passed, though more softly. A physician wraps the page's hands with linen steeped in something brown and bitter. The boy shakes, then steadies, then looks at his palms as if they belong to someone older. The apprentice carries away the failed cone in a bucket of water, the paper going slack as it dies. On the table, the soot writes its small history, 6 clean rings, 1 burst, tiny shards of grit that make a sound like dry rain when the cloth gathers them. Windows are opened. Cold night unthreads the smoke. Candles are relit. The tapestries take back their colors. Talk returns in little pieces, praise, caution, the naming of smells. Someone says brimstone will cling to hair for days. Someone else answers that saints prefer frankincense. The Lord nods toward the alchemist, and the nod is payment before the steward counts out silver. The craft is worth its price, even when it stings. Outside, the courtyard holds another kind of heat. Horses stamp and toss under saddle cloths, breath pluming white, iron ringing faint in the dark. Men walk the lines, patting necks, checking girths, gauging ground by heel and memory. Tomorrow the light will fall on hard earth, not on glass, and speed will be the flame. A misjudged stride, a mallet swung a hand's breadth wide, and fortune will turn as quickly as a spark in the Lord's hall. The field is a long, flat scar in the earth, grass worn down to a patchwork of dust and stubborn green. Beyond it, low hills hold the wind, funneling it across the ground in a steady breath that smells faintly of dry soil and horse sweat. There are no walls here, no rails to contain the play. Just the space between the 2 goal markers, upright posts planted deep enough to stand against both hoof and mallet. The ponies wait in loose lines, ears flicking, tails switching at the early flies. They are smaller than the destriers you've seen in war, but their necks are strong, their legs built for speed over turning, and their eyes carry that same glassy alertness that makes a horse look half wild even under tack. The riders adjust girths, shift mallets from one hand to the other, lean down to speak into pricked ears. Words are low, more for the speaker than the animal. The ball, hard as bone, light enough to fly, rests in the dust at the center. Its whiteness is already dulled from warm-ups. A boy runs it out and sprints back to the sidelines, bare feet kicking up little puffs. The wind carries the sound of the mallet heads tapping each other as the players wheel into place, an accidental drumbeat. When the match begins, it's sudden, like dropping a stone into a still pond. Ponies leap forward, hooves tearing at the ground. The ball vanishes under them, then appears again, rolling just ahead of a swinging mallet. The strike is clean this time, the ball darting low and fast toward the far goal. The chase is instant. Riders lean low, almost out of their saddles, the mallets arcing down in long, precise sweeps. There is no armor here, no blunted steel, but the danger is no less real. A pony cuts across the path of another, knees brush hard enough to numb both riders' legs. A mallet head glances off a shin instead of the ball. Someone swears in a language you half recognize and keeps riding. The dust rises in pale sheets, clinging to sweat-darkened coats, settling on lashes. Collisions happen at full gallop. Two ponies shoulder into each other, riders shifting weight at the last moment to keep the saddle. One man drops his mallet, reaching down for it as his mount surges on. Another hooks the head of his mallet around the ball only to overswing, spinning in the saddle to recover. The game turns in a heartbeat from ordered chase to tight knot, everyone swinging, blocking, shouting. From the sidelines, the sound is all rhythm, the drum of hooves, the sharp talk of wood on ball, the occasional dull thump of horse into horse. Somewhere a woman laughs, the sound carrying above the wind, though no one on the field hears it. They are inside the moment entirely, the rest of the world narrowed to the ground in front of them, and the posts ahead. A point comes not in a burst of triumph, but almost by accident, a clean strike through the uprights that sends the ball skimming out beyond the field. The wind pushes a little cheer from the crowd, brief and light. The riders slow, turning their mounts in wide arcs, sweat steaming from the ponies' flanks. Someone tosses the ball back in, and the knot forms again at the center. Falls are rare but hard. When a rider comes off, it's not a tumble into grass but into dust packed tight as brick. A breath leaves him in a grunt. A moment later he's up, waving off the hands that reach for him. The pony stands a few paces away, sides heaving, reins slack. It takes longer to settle the horse than the man. The sun drifts higher. Shadows shorten. The wind loses its cool edge. By the last few minutes, the ponies' mouths are flecked with foam, the riders' shirts dark in patches where sweat has soaked through. Every movement is heavier now, mallets slower to rise, turns wider, hooves hitting the ground with a flat, tired sound. When the match ends, there's no ceremony. Just reins loosened, girths slackened, mallets leaned against posts. Riders swing down and walk their ponies to the far edge of the field, where buckets wait. Water splashes, muzzles dip, tails swish in relief. Someone jokes about a broken collarbone from last year's match. The man in question shrugs like it was a tax he was happy to pay. The dust hangs a while after they've gone, a pale ghost of the game, until the wind finally pulls it apart. Beyond the field, the hills stand the same, holding the heat. And somewhere past them lies snow deep enough to swallow a hoof, where the chase runs longer and the quarry has teeth to match your own. The air here is the kind that grips your teeth. Each breath slides in like cold metal and leaves a film of ice in your nose. The snow doesn't lie in soft drifts. It's packed in places, hollow in others, crusted on top so that the first step holds and the second breaks through. Every sound feels close, wrapped by the trees, until a hoof strikes frozen ground, and the noise cracks wide open. The sled runners complain in a low, steady rasp. Harness bells make a thin music, too quick to be cheerful, too slow to be urgent. Steam lifts from the horses with every breath, dark in the shadow, pale where sunlight cuts through the pines. Behind them, on the sleds and on horseback, men hold spears. Not the slim, court-polished sort, but long ash shafts tipped with iron made dull by use. Gloves stiffen as the damp freezes in the seams. They follow tracks because scent is useless here. The cold flattens smells, buries them under resin and frost. The stag's prints are deep, the snow around them sprayed where it bounded away at the last turn. The wolves' marks are different, lighter, more deliberate, like a row of stitched holes leading away into shadow. The first sight comes not as a glimpse of the quarry, but as movement among the trees, a sudden shake of snow from a low branch, a bird lifting in a hurry. The riders shift in their saddles, boots squeaking against leather. Horses sense it too, ears forward, heads high, breaths loud enough to hear over the creak of tack. When it happens, it's quick. A gray shape cutting across the path, low and fast, a tail streaming behind like a strip of smoke. Shouts rise, muffled by scarves. Spears angle down. The horses lunge into the snow, throwing it back in sprays that glitter in the pale sun. You hear the sled's runners biting harder, the whips snapping once, sharp as splitting ice. The wolves don't scatter far, not yet. They turn and run alongside, always just at the edge of range, their paws hardly breaking the crust. A rider breaks from the group, pushing his horse harder, snow bursting at each stride. He closes the gap, the spear point dipping, and for a moment it seems he might take the lead animal clean. But the ground changes. A hidden drift swallows the horse to its knees. Momentum throws him forward onto the animal's neck. The wolf is gone before he's steady again. Farther ahead, the stag breaks cover. Its breath is visible even at distance, pulsing clouds that trail and vanish. Antlers tilt and swing as it bounds, each stride taking it over the dips where men and horses flounder. A spear arcs in the air, misses, and lands shaft first in the snow, humming briefly before it stills. The chase isn't clean or grand. It's stopping to pull a runner free of a frozen rut. It's the way snow creeps down into your boots, wetting the wool so that every step afterward burns with cold. It's the taste of iron in your mouth from breathing hard, the ache in your shoulders from keeping the spear ready. By the time the quarry is taken, wolf or stag, it's almost a surprise. The moment itself is quiet. No cheer, no horn, just a gathering of breath and the slow exhale of steam from men and animals alike. The prize pelt or haunch is bundled quick, wrapped against the same cold that nearly stopped the chase. There will be stories told of the leap that almost unseated a rider, or the wolf that turned at the last to snap at the spear, but here in the snow, it's just work finished. The way back is slower. Horses walk with heads low, sled runners softer now in the grooves they've made. The wind shifts, bringing the smell of smoke from somewhere far off. A village, perhaps, or just a lone fire. That and the promise of heat is what carries the men out of the trees. And when the snow melts, and the rivers loosen their grip, there will be another kind of chase, lighter on the ground, but no less treacherous, where bone on ice makes its own sharp music and the water beneath waits for a misstep. The river looks harmless in the weak winter light. A sheet of pale gray stretching between reed beds and bare willow roots, its surface mottled where yesterday's snow has blown thin. No current shows, no ripple, just a faint creak now and then as the ice adjusts to its own weight. Children test it first. They always do. Bones, polished and drilled at the ends, are lashed to their boots with leather thongs gone stiff in the cold. A stick in each hand for balance. The first few strokes are stiff, the body's hunched. Then the rhythm comes, a push, a slide, a push, a slide, skimming low over the glassy surface. The sound is light, almost cheerful, a dry hiss where bone meets ice. Adults follow, some with the same bones, others with nothing more than thick-soled shoes and a willingness to fall. They don't glide so much as shuffle forward, arms swinging in wide arcs. Breath clouds hang behind them, drifting slowly before they fade. The cold here bites differently than in the snow. It rises from below, through the soles, settling deep into the ankles and calves. The center of the river is smoother, the ice there stretched tighter. Out toward the banks, reeds poke through, and the ice darkens where the water is shallower. Children chase each other in loops, sometimes cutting too close to these edges. A hollow boom answers, deep and slow, like the voice of something underfoot. They glance down, laugh too loudly, and push off again. Not all cracks are visible. Some lie just under the surface, running like pale veins in the glass. A heavy step can wake them. The sound is sharp, a whip crack that travels farther than you expect. Heads turn. Feet still. Then movement resumes, a little slower, until the memory of the noise fades. One boy tries for speed. He lowers himself almost flat, bones flashing under his boots, sticks clattering against the ice. For a moment it works, he flies forward, the air stinging his face, eyes watering. Then one bone catches in a seam. His feet go out from under him. The sound of the fall is muffled, but the breath leaves him in a cloud that drifts above his still body until he rolls over, grinning, teeth white against his red face. A man skates in slow, deliberate lines near the middle, tracing shapes no one else can see. Each turn scrapes away a faint layer of frost, leaving a trail like chalk marks. His scarf flaps in the wind. He doesn't look at the others, not even when a girl shrieks as she almost goes down. Toward dusk, the light flattens further, and the surface begins to vanish into the color of the sky. This is when the ice is most dangerous. It's harder to see where it changes, where black water waits beneath. A small group heads upriver toward the bend where the old ferry landing used to be. The ice there has always been thin, but the snow hides its weakness. One step, then another, and the surface dips under a boot. The sound is sudden and wrong, a sharp crack, then a tearing sigh. Water pushes up through the split, dark and eager. The nearest skater lunges back, leather thongs straining as the bones scrape for purchase. Hands reach out, sticks clatter to the surface, someone is pulled clear. The hole steams briefly in the cold, then crusts over, pretending nothing happened. By the time the first stars show, most are gone. The ice holds their lines, loops, sharp turns, long sweeps toward the center, like a map drawn in pale scratches. Tomorrow's frost will blur them, and the river will look new again. And somewhere else, far from the stillness of this water, the ground will be churned and blackened, as if fire itself had been made into a game, and people will gather to watch God's judgment in the form of heat and steel. They gather early, before the sun has cleared the roofs, drawn by the promise of seeing something both holy and dangerous. The square smells of smoke and wet earth, the frost in the cobbles turning to mud where feet have already passed. A rope marks the space, more to keep the crowd from the church's patience than for safety. In the center, a table stands with two things upon it. One is a bar of iron, thick as a wrist, resting on a bed of coals that breathe a slow red. The other is a rope coil, pale against the dark plank, its end knotted for the weight of a stone. Both wait without hurry. The accused waits too. A woman in a plain wool dress, sleeves rolled to the elbow. Her hands are bare, pale from the cold. She doesn't look at the iron, though it stains the air with that scent you know from smithies, a hot tang, almost sweet, that catches in the throat. The priest moves about her like a man setting a table, checking the reliquary, smoothing the cloth laid over the altar just beyond. His voice, when it comes, is quiet and steady, carrying more to the iron than to her. The trial is simple, or so they say. 3 paces with the bar in her hands, or a rope tied to her wrists, and a plunge into the pond by the mill. Either way, the verdict is God's, and therefore beyond question. The crowd shifts, boots grinding in the grit. Children are lifted onto shoulders. Someone pulls a hood tight against the wind. The iron is lifted with tongs, its skin shimmering faintly. Laid onto the block, it hums against the wood. The priest signals. She steps forward. Hands close over the heat. For a moment, nothing moves, then her feet start the 3 paces. The crowd counts softly, a hiss of numbers beneath the crackle of the coals. 1, 2, 3. The bar drops back to the block, and her fingers curl against her palms. Cloth is wrapped quick, clean linen that will be sealed in wax. In 3 days they will look. If the skin is healing clean, she is innocent. If not, the sentence stands. The bar is set back on the coals. No one touches it now. The cold water ordeal is for others. A man steps forward this time, stripped to the shirt, wrists bound to the stone. The rope is looped, knotted tight, tested with a pull. He is led to the pond, the ice at its edges broken to let the water show its blackness. The mill wheel turns slowly, slapping drops into the air. They lower him in. The water swallows the sound for a breath, then he surfaces, legs kicking. He does not sink. The rope strains against his weight, the stone hanging useless as he floats high, chest and face clear of the surface. Voices murmur, guilty. The priest nods once. The rope hauls him back, dripping and shivering, to kneel in the mud. The crowd does not cheer. This is not a sport, though it draws the same number of eyes. They watch because it feels like the weather, something you cannot alter, only endure. Children are lowered back to the ground. Men pull cloaks tight and turn toward the tavern or the market. The coals are scattered, the rope coiled, the pond left to freeze again. But the memory clings. Days later, in the heat of a drinking tent or the narrow space of a booth, a word, cheat, will land wrong, and judgment will come not from saints or water, but from steel drawn quick in the street. The tent is warmer than the night outside, but only because so many bodies press together beneath the canvas. Smoke from the lamps hangs low, stinging the eyes, curling into the wool of cloaks and the fur at collar edges. A table runs down the center, scarred with knife marks, its edges polished smooth by elbows. On it, a scatter of coins, a few dough rings, a pawn dagger with a missing pommel jewel. The dice are bone, worn soft at the edges, stained with the oil of countless hands. They pass from palm to palm, each throw followed by the small silence before the clink. You hear the coins shift, sometimes toward one player, sometimes back into the middle. Now and then, there's a laugh that's not entirely friendly. You've learned to read the faces. Some wear pleasure too soon, others hide it too late. A man with a rag around his left hand taps the table whenever the dice land low, as if summoning a better throw. Across from him, a youth in a red hood leans close to see, his breath moving the dice before they're even lifted. A throw lands badly for the man with the rag. He swears softly, pushes forward his last silver. The youth's mouth twitches, not a smile, not quite. The dice roll again, and the youth sweeps the silver into his pouch. The ragged man's jaw works. The tent seems smaller. The word comes low, cheat. No one asks for proof. It's enough that it's been said. Chairs scrape back. The table shifts under the sudden movement. Outside, the air is sharper, clearer, the moon painting the cobbles with a thin glaze of light. Steel is the next language. Blades appear in the space between words. They're not polished for show, these are working edges, nicked and dark. The first clash is brief, metal to metal, the sound cutting through the quiet street. Then the footwork begins, each man stepping into and out of the moonlight, shadows swinging like pendulums. The youth's hood falls back, hair damp against his forehead. The ragged man presses, teeth bared in concentration, not anger. Boots scrape, a cloak hem catches on a barrel and tears. Somewhere nearby, a door opens just wide enough for someone to watch. It's not a fight for the kill. Not yet. A cut across the cheek, shallow but red, is often enough to settle such matters. An insult answered, a debt left unpaid but acknowledged. Tonight it works that way. The ragged man steps back, wiping his blade on his sleeve. The youth touches his cheek, fingers coming away dark, then nods once. The crowd that followed from the tent is already drifting off. The dice will roll again before the night's over. Coins will change hands. And someone else, later, will feel the wrongness of a word spoken in the wrong tone. Further down the street, carpenters are finishing the frame of a pageant cart, high wheels and rope ladders leaning against its side. Tomorrow, saints and devils will rise above the crowd, the air will smell of pitch and paint, and the danger will come from heights, not from steel. The square smells of pine pitch and fresh sawdust. Men are still hammering, their blows ringing against the cold morning air, while women in heavy aprons drag baskets of cloth toward the wagons. The carts themselves are tall enough to block the view of the church doors, wooden towers on creaking wheels, each tier crowded with painted boards, papier-mâché angels, and saints carved from light timber. Ropes run up the sides like the rigging of ships. A boy clings to one, feet slipping on the frost-slick spokes, as he hauls a bundle of painted stars toward the top tier. A ladder leans at an angle too steep for safety. Its rungs have been polished smooth by use, and a man at the top works with one arm wrapped tight around the side beam while the other nails a halo into place. Below him, someone is unrolling a banner, the cloth catching the wind like a sail. The pageant will start at noon. That means the carts must be rolled into position, lined up in order, and steadied with wedges. A mule stamps at the traces, the steam from its nostrils rising into the pale light. The driver murmurs and pats its neck, but the animal's ears flick nervously toward the pounding above. One cart carries a devil's mouth, hinged jaws painted red inside, teeth cut from thin wood and tipped with chalk to shine in the light. Two boys hide within, their job to work the rope that opens and closes the mouth as the procession moves. Already they're testing it, making the jaws snap at the hem of a woman's skirt as she passes. She swats them without looking. Up on the saint's cart, the top tier sways as a gust pushes against the banner. The man with the halo hammers faster, his boot heels clicking against the rung. Below, a woman gasps, not because of the wind, but because the ladder shifts, its bottom sliding an inch on the cobbles. A hand shoots out to steady it. Work goes on. When the carts finally roll, the sound is a groan of wood and a soft thunder from the wheels. People crowd close, craning to see the painted scenes, the moving parts. Children dart between the wagons, chasing the bits of colored paper thrown from above. The mules plod, harness bells ringing, hoofs striking sparks where the road shows stone. It happens without warning. A rope gives, a dull twang lost under the drumbeat from the musicians ahead. One corner of the saint's cart dips. The man on the ladder grabs for a beam, misses, and falls into a pile of painted shields, scattering them like dropped coins. On the devil's cart, the jaws snap shut unexpectedly, startling the boys inside into letting go of the rope. The mouth hangs open, swaying, teeth catching the light in an unintended grin. No one screams. It isn't that kind of disaster. Men rush forward, pushing shoulders against the tilted cart, others dragging the ladder out of the way. The man who fell groans but sits up, holding one wrist to his chest. The crowd murmurs approval when he manages a small bow. Someone picks up a halo and hangs it on a peg as if nothing has happened. Within minutes, the carts are moving again. The wedges are reset, the ropes retied, the devil's mouth tested and found willing to work. The music starts where it left off. If anything, the applause is louder now, as though the mishap itself were part of the show. By evening, the square will be littered with splinters, scraps of cloth, and the smell of trampled greenery. The wagons will be rolled back to their sheds, the ladders stacked, the devil's mouth closed for the year. And the people will go home certain that the story, saints, devils, near falls and all, will rise again next winter, exactly as it should.